the idea can start with just that careful observation out in the wild.
Welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur or innovator every single Wednesday morning who's turning wild ideas into wild growth. I'm your host, Max Branstetter, founder and podcast producer at MaxPodcasting, and yes, that is a new business. I launched a new business called MaxPodcasting. It is a podcast production company. I've been producing podcasts for quite some time now, and it's become more and more clear over time that it really deserves its own business. So, ta-da, Max Podcasting. You can learn more about my story and why I'm starting Max Podcasting in this blog post I wrote called Why I Started Max Podcasting, which took some incredible ingenuity to come up with the blog post name. But anyway, you can find that at the blog at maxpodcasting.com. And if you are an entrepreneur or business owner who wants a podcast for your business, but knows it's not in your best interest to spend all the time, all those fine, minute details that it takes to put together a high-quality podcast, I'm your guy. Anyway, that is Max Podcasting. This podcast will keep running per usual. Sorry, you have to deal with me some more. The only change from the podcasting perspective is Wild Business Growth Podcast is moving to its new home, which is Max Podcasting. This week's guest for episode 1 repeated is Rachel Inman. Rachel is a staff UX design lead at Google, and I got to tell you, this interview took me back to my childhood. I was absolutely obsessed with Google Earth, and now I use Google Maps all the time. Take those two things together. Those are both two pieces of tech that Rachel has worked heavily on, and she's got some incredible stories and insights to share. It's Rachel Inman. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here with Rachel Inman, the amazing designer, UX, wonderkind, amazing person. That's the title. Google Maps, Google Earth, etc. Basically all the coolest things in the world. Rachel, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you, Max?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining today. I literally grew up being obsessed with Google Earth. Like when it came out, I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I remember downloading it to my computer in my parents' basement and just like literally exploring the world from my parents' basement, which was never really knew something like that was possible. And since it's obviously evolved, we'll get to that. So I think what you do is just awesome. And before we get into what you're up to now, did you have any sort of affinity to the world of maps or Google Earth when you were growing up?
Yeah. So it's funny. My dad actually used to work at this place called the Map Shop
Oh my!
in down.
Wait,
Yeah.
so
So
you were born into this?
yeah, I definitely joke with my dad that he just throughout my life was priming me to work on Google Maps and Google Earth. Yeah, so he worked at the Map Shop, and the Map Shop is kind of what you might imagine with that name, full of maps of all kinds, of different types of globes. This was like back in the day where you had to go, purchase a physical paper map for like a road trip that you might be planning, or like a trip to Italy. But there was a definite need for the Map Shop. But I just remember like hanging out with him at work and just like exploring the rooms of the Map Shop and like being really fascinated with all of these artifacts and like all of these representations of Earth and maps, and how each one in some ways like was tailored for a particular type of trip or a particular type of person. It just felt like there was a map for everything. And I mean, I think that's really where my fascination with maps started. We also, I don't know if you had this as a kid, but like National Geographic magazine was like always somewhere in the house.
Oh
And
yeah.
so I definitely remember just like perusing National Geographic. I feel like even before I could read, like, because National Geographic just had like obviously like amazing images. It also had like these map and like infographic inserts in it. Yeah, I feel like that was also part of the priming. It was all part of my dad's master plan to get me to work on Google Maps and Google Earth.
I think so. He had a very, very specific and detailed master plan for you. So you were born into this amazing world of maps and Nat Geo and exploration there. I definitely have fond memories of looking at pictures even before I could read as well. So in the same boat there. What is it about the world of maps and exploration and just kind of seeing what's out there that really appeals to you?
Yeah, I guess like early on, in those early days of being in the map shop or looking at National Geographic and like playing with Google Earth, I think it was just really fascinating to see kind of all of these lenses that you could kind of put over the Earth to kind of like highlight different types of information depending on what type of story you were trying to tell or how you were trying to be useful to the reader. So that was kind of fascinating that like everywhere we go in the world there's like these layers of hidden information. Some of it's like really practical, like traffic information. Some of it, I often think like living in New York, when I'm walking around looking at some of these like really interesting buildings with like ornate architecture, I often wonder like, what did that building used to be? It's clearly wasn't always a bank because of its architectural style. So yeah, I don't know, something about like maps being perhaps this opportunity to bring forward these layers of information that are already in the world, but presenting them to readers and users in a way that might change their perspective on the world. I think I also just like love exploring and discovering new cities myself. I love traveling. I love like wandering around a new city and kind of like finding hidden gems and nooks and crannies of a city and getting the overall feeling of a new city. So I think, yeah, just kind of a combination of like the fascination with how information about the world could be presented, but also this kind of like affinity I have for just the act of going out and discovering things in the world.
I love the way you put it that this stuff is out there, but there's something about maps and Google Earth and Google Maps that it takes what's out there and kind of condenses it into a reasonable form that as a person you can literally be like sitting anywhere you want and virtually explore these places. And it could be places that you do end up exploring in person one day, but the fact that you can see the world in the palm of your hand is really just mind-blowing.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm geeking out about this stuff. And it brings me back to my childhood. But when you first started playing with Google Earth, how did you approach that? Like, what did you like to do on Google Earth?
Oh man, yeah, I think yeah, that you painted the picture of like you in your parents' basement. I think for me, like
We need somebody to actually paint a picture of that. I'm sure that would, sell for millions.
yeah, I think for me, the picture that comes to mind or the scene that comes to mind is we had this like big compact computer in our kitchen because that's kind of the only place in the house that was like had enough counter space to like accommodate if how big computers were back then. But yeah, I remember sitting there again with my dad. Like I feel he definitely had a plan. But anyway, sitting there with my dad, exploring different parts of the earth. One of the first things that we did was just simply search for our home address, which yeah is like kind of funny, right? Because like where you live, but like there's something really powerful or like something that really hits home about like
Wow,
searching.
that was bravo. That was very well done.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, something about it that about like searching for your home address and seeing kind of this aerial footage of where you live I guess kind of in context of this giant blue marble, like you kind of start with this giant blue marble, you like search for your home address and it like zooms you in all the way to like where your house is. Like, yeah, I think I remember that kind of being always how we would like start our exploration. And it's funny, like when I started working on Google Earth, we found that that's a super common behavior. It's almost like a way, I wonder if it's almost like a way that people are orienting themselves, like first with what they know and then kind of exploring out from there. But yeah, it's really common for people to like want to kind of search for home first,
Yeah, I was
which
gonna
is really
say
interesting. Yeah.
I hadn't thought about it till you said that, but I did the exact same thing. Like I think one of the first things I searched for was, oh, let's see what our house looks like, which
Right.
again is so funny because like you see your house 24/7. Oh, what's the top of the house look like? Like it's
Yeah.
not like this crazy like novel thing, but that perspective of seeing where you are is part of the entire world and seeing what stuff looks like and kind of how things are connected. I think that was really powerful, and when you're seeing it for the first time is crazy cool.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think there's something just really personal about starting with home and then branching out kind of to like, where, millions and millions of other people live across the globe.
And so you had this experience and you thought this stuff was really cool. And again, your dad had this evil plan of surrounding you with maps 24/7.
Right.
But you made this amazing jump to actually working on Google Earth and Google Maps one day, which is just amazing. So, I mean, there could be a whole another separate conversation about what it was like getting the job at Google. But specifically, how did it work out that you ended up working on these projects for Google Earth and Google Maps?
Yeah, great question.
Thank you.
So so I didn't originally when I was first hired to work at Google, it wasn't for the Google Maps team. It was actually for kind of an internal tools team, which was awesome. My manager was this great, very seasoned UX researcher who had like worked at NASA, and like I just learned so much from working with him. I guess I always had in the back of my mind this interest in the Google Maps team. I would see some of the stuff that they were working on. Yeah, I guess I just had always in the back of my mind that like perhaps like if I ever had the opportunity, it would be great to work for that team. It was like a really intimidating idea, but like one that I kind of held on to. Like I just felt like Google Maps is something that everyone uses, nearly every day. How could I possibly be qualified to help design that? But it was just something aspirational that I kind of came into to Google thinking about. The path to me working on Google Maps actually started with a random conversation I had when riding the bus one day. So I was visiting Mountain View, where Google headquarters is, and as you might have heard, that there are these buses that kind of help people get kind of to and from where they live to the campus. Um,
Just because I feel like everything in that part of the country is so spread out,
It
the Bay
is,
Area.
yeah. Yeah, totally. So on that bus, one day I had my DSLR camera with me because my plan after work was to go take some photos around campus. There was somebody sitting next to me who like clearly was like interested in my camera and like kept looking at the lenses that I was fiddling around with. He actually just started asking me questions about the lenses I had and what types of photos I was planning on taking later that day. And then that part of the conversation kind of led to what he was up to, which was he was trying to find the right lenses to like work well underwater for underwater street view.
Oh my god,
And yeah, in that moment, my
that would be
mind was
great. My inner Aquaman sense is like super excited about that one.
Right. Yeah. I didn't even know that there was underwater street view at the time. So yeah, my mind was blown. I was definitely immediately interested in whatever was coming next that he had to say. So it turns out that he was working on underwater street view, and he was also working on this thing called Global Fishing Watch, which kind of allows people across the world to see vessel activity in the high seas. So he told me all about this, and we were kind of reaching campus. The bus ride was about to be over, and he was like, yeah, you mentioned you're a UX designer. Funny enough, like we could really use some help with Global Fishing Watch, just making the user experience better. Let me know if you would be interested in that. So I was definitely interested and definitely emailed him, like I think probably like 2 hours after getting off the bus. Yeah, so that it's called a 20% project. That 20% project kind of led to me meeting more people on the Google Maps team, and then ultimately there was a full-time job opening on his team, and I decided to take the chance and make the move.
That's so cool. And I've heard about these 20% projects. I think it's a really cool thing to have as a company, kind of this willingness and trust in your employees to have them do sort of passion projects or experiment with things. Can you just explain how 20% projects works at Google?
Yeah, totally. So 20% projects at Google kind of allow people to pursue an interest maybe outside of their immediate assignment or their home team. So this could be like in a totally different area of Google. Oftentimes, or most of the time, people gravitate to 20% projects that are just very personally interesting to them. Yeah, 20% projects, it's a very like supported thing at Google. You learn about it in onboarding. It's a great way for you to explore interests outside of your immediate team. I think it's often a way too that people perhaps decide maybe like a year or two in to change teams within Google, which is also very supported. Like when I did find out about this opening on the Google Maps team, I was just like so surprised of how like supportive my manager was
Yeah.
for me to switch over to that. So I think pursuing personal interests and trying as much as possible to align your personal interests with like the teams and projects available, I think is just kind of a core part of how we work. So 20% projects are like a key part of doing that.
That's amazing that it actually turned into like your main job, your main focus. And it started as this 20% of just, oh, this is kind of something I'm passionate about. You're proof of how a strategy like that can work and put people with their best skills to the teams where they could be of most help. When you started working on the new team, I know that one of your first roles was working on Google Earth and the redesign of Google Earth. What was involved in that?
Yeah, a lot. I guess in short, a lot was involved
A lot.
in redesigning Google Earth.
It's not like it's the whole Earth or anything.
As evidenced by your fond memories of using Google Earth as a kid, this was and is a product that a lot of people have a ton of love for, and we really wanted to kind of just further enhance that and build on that product love. So part of the impetus for redesigning Google Earth was, as you mentioned, back in the day, you had to download Google Earth onto your desktop in order to use it. It was not optimized for mobile for a while, and we really wanted to just in general make it easier for people to use wherever they might find themselves, whether on the go, on the train, or at home, just wanting to show their kids something. So just overall making it easier for people to access the product. And then as well at the time, there had been this introduction of Google Material Design, kind of a refresh that had happened across the company, across all of our major applications. We wanted to bring Google Earth up to speed with material design. So really enhancing the overall look and feel of the product, so that it would fit well within just like the overall suite of Google products that had also been updated. And then I guess kind of a third thing that comes to mind is we had definitely heard from passionate users of Google Earth how the product was helpful for them, even in their daily work, not only for just pure enjoyment. We learned that teachers and students were really primary users, one of our primary user groups of Google Earth, and we felt like there was an opportunity to look at the product again, look at the features that we might introduce, and perhaps tailor some of those features specifically for teachers. All of those things kind of combined led to us redesigning the product.
And shout out my girlfriend Dana, who is an amazing teacher. I don't know if Dana and her team are using Google Earth, but it seems like a really cool thing to think back to, like when we were growing up and you think about the giant maps and atlases and things on the wall, but those are all two-dimensional. To think about how you could learn and use something that's like a movable thing that you could look at on your iPad or on the screen in front of students, and you can learn by like literally customizing things any way you want, I think is a really, really cool opportunity. So it's neat that you had that insight and made some changes with teachers in mind.
Yeah, working with teachers and interviewing teachers about how they used Google Earth or what they wish they could have in the product was actually one of my favorite parts of working on this project. There was this week that we actually got to do what's called a co-design session, like a co-design workshop with teachers from across the US and Canada, and they all brought their great ideas, and we actually got to design together. So yeah, I kind of created like little brainstorming and sketching kits to make it easier for them to get their ideas on paper. But it was in that particular co-design workshop that a lot of the features that we ended up putting in the product actually kind of were first thought of.
That's so cool.
Yeah, particularly around creation tools. So teachers really wanted the ability to, not only have their students be able to look at these types of stories from National Geographic or BBC overlaid on the Earth, but also wanting to make stories of their own. All of those insights kind of gathered during that co-design workshop were just super critical to us prioritizing what we decided to put in the product.
It just goes to show how valuable feedback is and can be, especially when it's directly from the people or the profession that you know that you're targeting with your product or service. So that's the key insight. I think a lot of people had no idea that Google Earth and some of the updates to it's really driven by insights by teachers. That's such a cool tie there. And you are on the UX side, the user experience side. So when you're thinking of this stuff from a UX standpoint, what are your priorities to making sure that it is a pleasant user experience and people are actually enjoying their time on these platforms?
Yeah, I guess to break it down in kind of stages, I guess. On the UX side, I guess we're kind of focused on what I would say are these three different big areas or stages of the product development process. So the first one being very much the why. What questions are we trying to answer? What problems do we see out in the world today that we feel like we could do a better job fixing? For some of the foundational interviews we did with teachers, just generally getting a sense of even regardless of Google Earth, like what's their process like when forming a lesson plan? What materials and tools do they already use? But really, the why portion of our job is just uncovering a lot of foundational information in whatever sphere or subject matter we're grappling with for the product that we're working on. And then I guess the next section you could kind of categorize as the what. So, if we've examined the user problems in the why, now how might we address those user problems? This is where a lot of kind of specific brainstorming, concept ideation comes into play. Some of those specific ideas that the teachers were generating in the co-design workshop, all of that was very much centered around the what, right? Like what features could address some of the problems or pain points that they had called out, or how could we just like make this better. And then I guess the third phase is really getting into the details of how we're going to do this. Throughout this whole process, ideally you are collaborating with engineering, with product management, and the other disciplines. But the how section, in the how section, it becomes particularly important that you are sitting side by side with engineers, really ironing out how this is going to work, how is this going to feel. This sounds kind of linear, but in reality, it's all like a messy jumble, and it's never happening in perfect in perfect linear fashion. But I guess to answer your question broadly about like what does working on a user experience entail, I think our work can very much be kind of bucketed into the why, the what, and the how.
Yeah, and I'm kind of kicking myself because the three buckets or the approach of I feel like you can take literally any complicated problem or thing you're working on, and if you structure it in three buckets, it just goes such a long way into simplifying it and making it a more reasonable approach of whatever you're doing. And shout out to my buddy Ryan Foland who talks about that when he's giving advice on branding, personal branding, and how like whatever you do, whatever your offering is, whether you're a solopreneur, whatever you're doing, if you just describe it in terms of three different things, that's something that everybody can wrap their head around, three things like that. So it's cool that you take that approach with something so complicated and messy and jumbled like that.
And of course, like that is a very high level like simplification
No,
of
that's
what
it. No,
of
anybody can do their own UX and design the world maps now.
yeah. Yeah, and so there's a lot that goes into each one of those buckets or each one of those phases, but I think it's useful to, you said it kind of sounds simple, but I think it's really easy when you're caught up in the moment or you're just caught up in the excitement of a project to particularly I've noticed want to just start coming up with solutions, coming up with concepts, right? Because that's the fun part, the like, sketching on a whiteboard, thinking of all the things we could possibly do. But when we kind of take a step back and say, well, we really want to address, the full, why, what, and how, that kind of is a good reminder of before we start digging into all of these great ideas that are really exciting, can we actually just make sure that we are all aligned on the problems that we're trying to solve, and some of this like foundational understanding of what's the user's mental model in this scenario, what kind of preconceived notions are they already coming in with, and just having a really solid understanding of that first, before getting into the nuances and details and all the ideas. I think, yeah, so it definitely sounds simple, but I even find myself reminding myself like, before I get really jazzed about a particular idea, like, let me take a step back. Is this oriented around real user problems, or am I just really excited to like sketch this on paper?
Right. Yeah. And that's key if you have the ability to kind of pause and take a step back and think about it from with the whole perspective in mind. And so that's on the Google Earth side. You also have worked some magic on the Google Maps side. Google Maps is already obviously a well-oiled machine. It's used by so many people around the world and integrated with so many different things now. How do you and your team take this thing that's already awesome and can already do so much and add things to make it even better?
Yeah. I think it's related to the last thing we were talking about of kind of the why, what, and how. As you said, Google Maps, it provides a lot of utility to people every day. So how do we improve it, or what needs to be improved? It's fine, right? I think that
Yeah,
yeah, I think
just let it sit there.
yeah, I think for me and the massive rest of the team that works on this, because to be clear, I am like one of many UX designers working to make Google Maps better. For us, it's really about careful observation of how people are just operating out in the world. How are people commuting on a daily basis? How are they navigating a new city? How are they discovering restaurants or finding out information about businesses? But I think that kind of finding those things out can only come from careful observation, and that careful observation can happen in just an informal way. We have the Google Maps team is spread across the entire globe. We have offices in many major cities, and I think a lot of the best ideas from the Google Maps team, they come from everyone just being really observant of like how things are working in the cities in which they live. So it can happen in an informal way. Somebody can see something, write up a proposal and do proper research around it, but the idea can start with just that careful observation out in the wild. We also have more formal ways that we gather those observations. One thing that I love that we do is this thing called immersion trips, where we specifically go to cities that we as a team are unfamiliar with, and we talk to people who live there. We shadow people as they go about their kind of regular routine. Just interview a lot of people, do careful observation in those settings. And that is just, even just a simple act of shadowing somebody in their daily routine as they get ready for work, as they kind of plan their day and then do their commute, and kind of manage the craziness of their family. Like, you can learn so much and just empathize so much with someone just from kind of that simple act of observation through shadowing them. So those are some of the ways that we kind of find out what should be fixed, or what we could add or improve upon.
Yeah, I think it's so cool that you do so much research and observation, and what you're describing sounds like it might be coming from a company's R&D department, or like people that are just focused on the research or the market research side of things. But clearly it can be designers, it can be people from all different sorts of functions in the business. It really helps to get out there and just experience things, observe, get feedback that way, and that's how these amazing products can happen. What are some examples of projects that you've either worked on for Google Maps or you're currently working on that you're really excited about?
Yeah, the project that I have been working on for the past few years has to do with bringing augmented reality into Google Maps, which is has definitely been an exciting ride. And that that project really started with again, like the observation of this very relatable experience that we've probably all had. You come out of the subway or you come out of a building and you need to get somewhere and you're trying to figure out just like which way to start walking, and you're looking at the map and like it's just really hard to tell which way that you need to start walking, and the blue dot is kind of bouncing around, and so you just start walking, and then maybe a couple blocks later you realize that you've been walking in the completely wrong direction.
Oh, happens way too often.
Yeah, so like that was something that we knew people were really struggling with, and kind of around that same time we were experimenting with the idea of augmented reality and Google Maps, and I was kind of brought in early on to figure out like, okay, we have this technology, this thing that we could do, but obviously we don't want to like shove augmented reality into Google Maps without a clear purpose, without a why. I looked at a lot of past research, and we did some foundational studies to just really understand like how people get oriented, how they kind of make sure they're on track throughout the walking navigation journey. And in doing that, we really realized that AR like actually could have a strong role to play in this journey, in this navigation experience, because what people are struggling with in that moment of like, which way should I start walking? They're struggling with, the blue dot is bouncing around because GPS and compass just don't work as well in urban environments where there's a bunch of steel buildings everywhere. Yeah, and along with that, it's kind of an abstraction issue, right? Like the map, rightly so, is this abstraction of the real world, because otherwise, if it had all the detail, it might be harder to grok quickly. But it's this abstraction that you're then trying to cross-reference with what you're seeing in the real world. It was kind of a light bulb moment for us to think like, well, I mean, one of the strengths of AR is allowing us to believably place things in the real world. Whether that's like putting, an AR, like a realistic looking like AR dragon, like in your living room, or what have you, like kind of a lot of the exciting parts of AR, the things that make it compelling are this kind of like believability of putting something in the world. So we kind of thought, okay, well, maybe putting AR directions in the real world through the camera pass through, perhaps that could solve both the GPS and compass problem, but maybe also the abstraction issue that people were grappling with. And we actually found through user research that a lot of people struggle with that map abstraction. Like it can be really anxiety inducing. And so we were excited to start experimenting with how an AR complement to the map would be helpful.
And I think that's a cool way to look at it is complementing it. It already has its main functions, but what can you add in this new crazy technology space that could be just what a certain person needs that day? What can you add to it? And don't feel like you need to give any private information or we have lawsuits on our hands or anything like that. But if you were to look at the future Google Maps and kind of the way things are trending or how it's looking, what's something that we as consumers should expect or see out of Google Maps in the future, just the way things are trending?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the way things have been trending in the last few months, I've just been super impressed with how the Google Maps team has rallied around and responded to the needs of people, both consumers and business owners in light of COVID. So, kind of particularly how we've made it easier to see if a restaurant is doing delivery, takeout, dine in, and also making it easier to support local businesses by like adding ways that you can easily buy gift cards or donate through their place page. And as well, like for tools for merchants, they're able to they've been able to update their pages to kind of do their pivot to online classes or online appointments or online estimates, whatever their business might be. It's hard for me to project into the future because it's just like such a time of uncertainty for all of us. But I can
Right.
say that I've been really inspired and blown away with how quickly and how enthusiastically the whole, like everyone working on Google Maps has been in just looking for ways to help business owners and customers in the past few months.
Well, appreciate what you and the team have done to be so on top of that. I mean, you can see it. The examples you talked about, I definitely noticed just scrolling through Google Maps on my phone and seeing how much it's changed and helped, and there's new options for the endless local businesses out there. And there are endless hours that you could spend on your podcast, but that doesn't mean it's the best thing for your business. If you want a podcast to help grow your business or your brand, and you know that it's not in your best interest to spend the time it takes to do everything for that podcast, hit me up at max@maxpodcasting.com and we'll get it rolling. Now, back to your favorite Googler. Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's get to a segment on inspiration and creativity. For you personally, what do you do to stay creative?
Yeah, I'm I'm laughing because I'm looking forward to later today when I can just leave my phone at home and go on a walk. The main way that I stay creative is getting away from my screen. Um,
Well, sorry
especially
for keeping you to your screen for this one.
well, this is an audio only interview, so I'm actually looking out the window as I talk to you. Um,
Perfect. Oh, that actually explains a lot. No, I'm just kidding.
Especially now that all of our meetings are, on the computer, yeah, I've just been feeling like the best way for me to stay fresh and stay creative is to get away from my screen. I love, love, love taking long walks in New York City. I love like picking a point on the map and then just like zigzagging my way there, following the crosswalk signs. And just like letting my mind wander. I love looking at all of the unique architecture in the city and observing the different neighborhoods and how like one neighborhood to the next just has like a super different vibe. So yeah, I love going on long walks. I think another thing that I do to kind of stay creative is talking to friends who do not work in tech. I have friends who they're journalists or they work in theater or law, and at the end of the day, like I just love listening to what's up with them and what they're grappling with. I find that new ideas come to me much easier when I'm having a dialogue with someone who doesn't work in my same field all the time. Inspiration strikes in those areas. I also try to do activities that are pretty unrelated to my daily work. So for a few years, pre-COVID, I was going to the ceramic studio almost every week, and it's hard to look at your screen when your hands are covered in mud. So that's like
That's true.
a good way to disconnect.
It's hard to operate your computer too.
Yeah, totally. So that was definitely a good distraction. I have started taking creative writing classes, part of NYU's like continuing education courses. So that has been super interesting, really challenging. Like I definitely have newfound respect for just writers across the board. But I love a new challenge, and in taking the most recent one was fiction writing, and I feel like that definitely stretched my brain in ways that that it hasn't been in a while. So yeah, doing activities kind of totally out of the realm of UX design is a good way to stay creative for me.
Yeah, I would say those are like the complete opposite of UX design. What is one tip you can share from the creative writing class that was
Oh my
really
gosh.
thought provoking for you?
I wonder if my teacher is gonna, if she's listening. Um,
Oh God, we got another lawsuit on our hand.
okay, so if you're interested in fiction writing, if you're interested in creative writing, I think one thing I learned from that class is just to let yourself write without editing while you write. So I think it's really tempting for a lot of us. The writing that we do in our daily work is it's definitely nonfiction, and it always has like a specific purpose. Oftentimes we create an outline beforehand, or filling out a form. That is not how you want to approach fiction writing necessarily. When you're in the beginning stages of developing a story, I feel like the best results came from me just kind of letting out all of my ideas and then only editing like after the fact, because it's kind of interesting, like your brain will take you along paths that you didn't expect, and oftentimes those paths are like way more interesting than if you had made kind of an explicit outline in the outset. So yeah, just like letting yourself write, and I think that can come when you are thinking about a particular concept for a story, or just letting yourself write at the end of a long day and seeing what comes out.
That approach works for so many different things because it definitely makes sense from the writing standpoint. I'm thinking about it from the podcasting standpoint. Like when I'm recording the intro for the podcast, for some reason, recording the intro is like more difficult than the whole like hour or less long interview. I don't know what it's just tough, being so time constrained like that. But I think historically, I've recorded something and then I'll realize I'm like saying it wrong, and then I'll repeat that same word to make it sound right, or I'll do that, but then it ends up being like it can take like 5 to 10 minutes to record like a 1 minute intro, which just doesn't make sense. But lately, I've been just kind of rolling with it, and I just say my entire intro based on like what I feel is right for that episode, and then I'll go back and like if I need to edit it, I'll say something again, after the fact. And it's kind of the same approach you're taking from the writing standpoint. When you have something in your natural voice, whether it's writing or podcasting or speaking, whatever, if you just kind of say it naturally first time through and then go back and you can make edits after, I really do feel like it comes across way better and way more genuine.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree.
And on the Google side, what's something that stands out to you about the culture at Google that encourages so much creativity?
I think I was struck by this even just a couple weeks in, but just how supportive everyone is, how like willing to help and like non-judgmental everyone is. Like I guess a good example of this from my, I think it was my second week. I had a question about how to use a particular UI component, and so I naively emailed the entire Google UX team, which is like
I think I
thousands
got
of
that email too.
yeah, it was like thousands of people. I remember like my coworker turning around after I had sent it and he received it. He was like, "Hey, you do know that that went to like everyone globally who works on UX," and I was mortified. But the upside to that interaction was, just within 10 minutes, I had about 10 different people who had responded really thoughtfully, and I didn't even know these people. I just started, and they were like, "Hey, like, yeah, actually, I can help you with this question. Do you want to hop on a call? I can walk you through it." Like I didn't even know these people, and they were already willing to be so helpful, and they were all they didn't they didn't judge me for perhaps asking a basic question on a giant mailing list. So I guess the reason I bring that up in terms of like Google supporting creativity is I think that when a working environment feels like it has a lot of rules, or you're going to be judged if you like do the wrong thing, it becomes stifling to creativity. Like you don't feel free to like have that meandering conversation or explore those out there concepts. But when even from the outset, even from like your second weekend, it just feels you just feel this like overwhelming amount of support. I don't know, it makes you feel like anything's possible, or you could come up with a out there idea and get feedback from
Yeah,
people, and that could turn into a new feature. Yeah, so I feel like a supportive environment, one where we're really trying to like leave judgment at the door, like that is a great environment for people to thrive creatively.
that belief and support goes such a long way. And your example cracks me up because it makes me think back to in the office when Michael Scott is thinks he's emailing a picture to Todd Packer and he accidentally sends it to the entire packaging department. It's
Yeah.
basically you did that. You totally Michael Scotted it.
Yeah, I love The Office.
Let's get to a fan favorite segment called the Wild Business Shout Out of the Week.
The Wild Business Shout Out of the Week!
Wild Business Shout Out of the Week. This is where we talk about a creative marketing campaign that really cut through. And you experienced something with the Met for their 150 anniversary, which, I mean, happy birthday, by the way. But What was this and what stuck out to you about it?
Yeah, so this past weekend I visited the Met, and it was, I think, one of the first weekends that they were open for any kind of like visitor capacity. It was obviously limited capacity. They took our temperature on the way in, so far less people than you would normally see at the Met during this time of year. Leading into that trip, and then while being there, I was really impressed with their materials and marketing around the 150th anniversary. They used a lot of historical imagery and historical footage, both of visitors and kind of the curation team, and mashed that up with present day imagery in this really beautiful way that, I don't know, it just struck me because the way they did it, it reminded me of all of the, just like if you're standing in a single place in the Met, in any of the large halls or in front of like any of the paintings, the campaign just reminded me of like how many people have like stepped in that place before, how many people have like lingered in front of like that same sculpture that you're lingering in front of right now. And I guess kind of going back to like the layers, like the map layers idea, or that like the world around us is just full of like all of these layers and stories. Like I think that campaign, it just like kind of struck a chord with me because I was like, wow, yeah, like just millions and millions of people who have like stood where I'm standing now and walked these halls, and had all these like powerful experiences in front of art. I don't know, there's something just like really emotional about it. So
Yeah, I'm getting emotional. And it applies to any business that the better that you can kind of celebrate the old and the new, it's just such a cool experience for whoever is watching it or listening to it or standing at a museum looking at something, because I think so often as business owners or whatever field you're in, I think so often you're focused on the now and the future, that from like the outside perspective you forget that there's tons of cool stuff in the past or things about the past to celebrate at your business or institution wherever you work. And having those throwbacks and kind of going for that nostalgia while combining the old and new, I think is such a cool thing. And for like your example, museums, like there's literally endless stuff you can pull from and endless stuff that's been curated that you can turn into really, really cool and break through campaigns with a modern twist. And so it's really cool that the Met did that. And you obviously are a super fan of the Met as you were there like day number one. So I love that
yeah.
example. So let's get to the unusual. So this is pet peeves, quirks, and weird talents. So Rachel, what's your biggest pet peeve?
It really gets under my skin when I'm hanging out with somebody one on one and they keep pulling out their phone, and they just seem so preoccupied with their phone. And so they're not fully, engaged in the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, it happens definitely far too often. How about quirks? What's something that maybe friends or family, coworkers, somebody calls you out for that's a little bit quirky about your personality, but it's who you are?
We're doing this, it's audio only, but when I talk, I close my eyes a lot. And so,
Really? Oh, I'm surprised you
yeah.
didn't want to do video. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I was actually like really relieved. Yeah, I close my eyes a lot when I talk, and so what happens is like in video or photos of, group photos, my eyes are just like inevitably closed. And my friends, like I think when they do impressions of me, like it definitely involves like closing eyes a lot.
Hey, you're a deep thinker. You're always deep at thought. And then how about weird talents? In addition to closing your eyes for pictures, what else are you just have a knack for, you're really good at, but it doesn't really necessarily have an impact on your business? It could be something around the apartment, it could be like a party trick, whatever you want.
I don't know if I would do this at a party, but I think it is kind of a strange talent. So with a lot of people, I think, being at home a lot because of COVID has led to maybe the discovery or rediscovery of talents. And for some reason, I've been compelled lately to make tiny fruit out of Sculpey clay. Like, so I like have
Really?
sculpted.
I was just about to guess that.
I know it's like so random. So I love tiny
Wow.
things, and I had some leftover Sculpey clay, like from Michael's, and I don't know exactly where this idea popped into my head, but I just started making tiny food out of Sculpey clay, and I'm actually pretty good at it. Like, it looks like believable. I mean, if there were things that were this tiny, I don't know, it looks pretty believable. So like, so far I've made a little pizza, some spaghetti. Last week I made like a little tiny bowl of lemons. Um, I know this is like so random, but that
No, this is
is
awesome.
a weird. I mean, it's weird that I'm like surprisingly good at this. I don't know. It's not useful at all for my daily job, but it's super fun.
That is super fun. And there's a lot of Instagram accounts that have like made their careers by doing tiny art like that. I don't know if it's officially a category of tiny art, but so you clearly are good at that. I don't know if you've started doing it already, but you should definitely post some of them on like your Instagram and social media because people just, I mean, there's a lot of people that like tiny things like that. So
Yeah, I can find my people.
tiny people. Let's wrap up with some rapid fire Q&A. All right, let's get wild. What is your favorite place other than your house that you've discovered on Google Earth or Google Maps?
This past December holiday, I was talking with my grandparents. A long time ago, they lived in Japan for a period of time.
Oh
They
wow.
lived in yeah, they lived in Nagahama, which is kind of like between Tokyo and Kyoto.
I was going to guess that as well.
I'm just orienting you because I work on maps, so I have to like
Perfect.
make
I was
sure
going to say
you
any geography questions, I know who I'm going to now.
yeah, so over a meal one evening, they were describing where they lived. My grandmother took Japanese while she was there, and like where the school was, and where my grandfather, the factory that he worked at, where that was. And so we actually just pulled up Google Earth and started trying to identify exactly where these things were, so that my grandmother could kind of explain like her routine and like how she, every morning she would like walk by a particular bakery and then like go to school for her Japanese classes. Yeah, so that was really cool that like we could pretty well pinpoint and like retrace their steps on Google Earth. And I haven't been to Nagahama yet, so maybe one day I'll try to do that same little path in real life. But it was cool that we were able to find it on Google Earth.
Definitely, definitely. You definitely should. There's generational benefits to this stuff. So that just made me think about it in a whole new light as well. What is your favorite meal of the famed and historic Google food that you have?
I guess staying on the Japan theme a little bit, I had the opportunity to go to the Google Tokyo office a couple years ago. I just have to say that Google does a great job. The whole food team does a great job at Google, like feeding us and just like providing really awesome stuff. But I went to the Tokyo office. I filled my tray with like everything. Like they had amazing ramen, they had dumplings, they had just like all of this amazing stuff, all of this like grilled fish. It was just so delicious. It was like I had gone to like a super nice Japanese restaurant, and I was so full after eating all of that, but it was so worth it.
Definitely so worth it. That makes me hungry as well. And what's something about, I don't know the name for it, but like the Google cars that go around and take pictures for Street View. What's something about those Google mobiles that you think would surprise people?
Well, yeah, I think people definitely think about the Street View cars as like being. I feel like a lot of people assume that that is like how we know where the roads are and how we kind of map the buildings. I don't think people know how many of the updates on maps actually come from locals, like just regular people, saying that a business has been added or a new business has cropped up or a new road has been paved. We actually have this like amazing global community of Google Maps local guides, just super passionate locals who have just like made it their personal mission to make sure that their community information is up to date. And like literally when a new business pops up or hours change or a new road is introduced, these great local guides are just like on it and submitting changes to Google Maps. And yeah, I think people would be surprised just how much we rely on just people in their individual communities contributing things like that.
That's so cool. That actually hits, to use your pun, hits close to home because I might be getting this story totally wrong. It might be a different reference, but it was something with my cousin Josh, his sister Sam, and then her husband Matt Josh lives in Jersey City, and his apartment complex, there was like a dead end that on maps said it was like a street that you could go through, and they reached out and got it updated. And so like that's kind of an example of how much help it can be to crowdsource something like that. That stuff is just fascinating, and it's obviously much easier for you guys and for people as a whole when you get feedback like that from real users as opposed to trying to do everything yourself. And then my last question is, how good are you at the geography category and trivia?
Oh, I feel like there's a lot of pressure on me to to be good at geography. I think growing up, I don't know if you had these in grade school, but like remember when they would give us like those maps that didn't have any labels?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like I was pretty good at that, and maybe I'm still pretty good at it. But oh gosh, don't ask me trivia questions. I feel like there's a lot of pressure.
All right, the pressure's on. Well, Rachel, thank you so much. Really, really, really appreciate your story and your obsession with tiny fruit and everything in between, but the amazing story of kind of how it works in the Google Earth and Google Maps, etc. world. Where's the best place for people to connect with you?
Yeah, you can feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. My handle is Rachel_Inman. Yeah, Twitter or LinkedIn. Always happy to answer any messages.
Perfect. And then I'm going to send you a map with all the labels taken away just for fun. But last thing here, final thoughts. It could be a quote, it could be just a message you want to leave everyone with. Anything you want. The stage is yours.
Okay. Wow, no pressure.
Yeah. Also, we have 6 geography questions coming up now.
Yeah, so I guess one thing I've been thinking about lately, I know that 2020 has just been like full of a lot of uncertainty for a lot of people. And I think also too, I've been hearing and seeing like a lot of folks kind of having kind of questions to themselves about like what they should be doing in life and their careers because of all this time to contemplate at home, for many of us. And I think one thing that's been on my mind is just thinking about curiosity and like where your personal curiosity like naturally leads you, and kind of listening to that carefully, not necessarily kind of thinking about this is like a perfect 5-year plan, or this is like a very reputable career path. But I feel like one thing I've been telling folks who are kind of going through this right now is, to really listen to that little voice inside your head that like says, this is interesting, this is piquing my curiosity. Because I think if you are able to kind of follow that curiosity on whatever winding road it takes you, you'll be just like deeply satisfied and much happier than kind of trying to maybe structure a plan around something else. So yeah, follow your curiosity.
Bit of a curious answer, to be honest. Thank you so much, Rachel, for sharing your story, sharing your lessons, your claymation, and everything in between. And thank you, wild listeners, for tuning in to another episode. If you want to hear more wild stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite app and tell a friend about the Wild Business Growth Podcast. And if you want to save time with your high-quality podcast, visit MaxPodcasting.com. Until next time, let your business run wild.
Bring on the bongos!